Yes.
Okay, awesome. So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session, The Art of Teaching, Building Community, Critical Thinking, and Active Learning in Today's College Classroom. So today I have the pleasure of being together with Professor Kimura and Professor Greg. And I think we'll start each by introducing ourselves in case you don't know us. So we can start with Professor Kimura.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Anna. What a pleasure to be here. I am Kimura, and I'm a professor who's based in law and police science at John Jay, but I also teach in anthropology honors, the grad school in criminal justice, and in sociology year-round. I have developed courses on correctional education, the first of their kind in the country, so we're real proud about that at John Jay, and we're expanding corrections as we do that. My areas of specialty are ethics, leadership, and corrections, and as I indicated, correctional education. It is a real pleasure as a nominee for the teaching award to be here today with my colleagues. I'm completely honored. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. And Professor Greg?
Yeah, hi, I'm Greg Donaldson. I'm in the English department. I've been teaching for 56 years. I'm retiring this semester. And I've taught elementary school, junior high school in the prison system. I've been teaching on the college level for over 40 years. And I'm not really an expert. I do a lot of things. I'm an actor, a writer, but I don't do anything as well as I teach. And I like nothing better than to talk about teaching. And that's what we're going to do today.
Thank you both. And you will see why it is such a pleasure for me to be together with Professor Kimura and Professor Greg, because I've only started at John Jay 2 years ago. I'm an assistant professor in toxicology, so in the sciences department. I have a background in forensic sciences, and eventually I specialized in forensic toxicology. I'm very much passionate about teaching, and especially teaching at John Jay. So I'm very happy to be here and honored to share the floor with my two colleagues. So we brought here some sentences that kind of summarize our teaching, and I will invite each of us to read them for you to grasp an idea.
Yes, I shall begin. Thank you, Anna. So I believe that if we teach our students critical thinking skills, we have the potential to enhance their leadership skills in criminal justice. And the reason I say that is because if we are developing critical thinking skills, it's amazing how they can blossom, how the students can blossom in front of us in the classroom, whether it's asynchronously, synchronously, or in person, or as a hybrid format. I think, as we all know, when we look at critical thinking skills, we're talking about analysis, in other words, analytical thinking. We're looking at research. We're asking them to ask questions that make sense, that are logical. We're pursuing a sense of creativity. We're making them as curious as we can about life. We're trying to also make sure that they communicate effectively and respectfully, and that they make decisions that can then be utilized to develop their leadership skills. So critical thinking skills are crucial, and I'll talk about that more later.
Thank you so much, Kimura. And Greg?
Well, there you see it. You can read it for yourself. I believe that you have to adapt your teaching style to your audience. I think that you want to create a classroom that is spontaneous, where the feeling in the classroom is that anything could happen at any moment, which engages the primary nervous system of the students that are involved. So in that case, they cannot be quite sure of what you're going to do or say. So that's where the word daring comes in, where it's personal, and the fact that everybody says, well, I treat everybody the same. I treat everyone differently. I treat everyone according to what they give me. I try to understand them. I try to understand the students in general and in particular, and I challenge them with that. A little caveat about what I'm going to say for the rest of my short time is that I'm a kind of in-your-face teacher who engages in hyperbole and dramatic techniques, you can do the opposite and be successful. You can use understatement. You can be somewhat removed. But your system has to work. You have to be a reflective practitioner of what you're doing. So there's all different kinds of ways to do this. The way I do it is not the only way, but there are certain universal principles, and which I'll hit on them and I'll try to hammer them home.
Thank you, Greg. And basically what I wrote is, since I haven't started that long ago, is something that I see in the classroom and I try to apply it as well, is how did I wish to be treated when I was a student? And since I'm on the other side now, I can actually apply that to the students I have right now. So understand them as an individual, and like it goes also with what Greg was saying, everyone is different, everyone responds to different methodologies, teaching techniques. And so understand their own struggles, distinct confidence levels, and work around that. So work on their best sides and try to awaken that best sides of themselves. So, as you know, and it is in our title, we brought here for you some critical thinking skills. They comprise of analysis, communication, open-mindedness, problem solving, and creativity. These words will come up later in our presentation, because we do believe these are some of the skills we should enhance as we do our teaching. And we brought up ourselves a question while we were thinking about all of this and while we were preparing this presentation for you. Is critical thinking dead in 2024? That's something that we will cover later on as well, and how can we deal with that? Because we do have some challenges in the modern days. And how do we change that? How do we approach those challenges, right? So we all believe that active learning also comes from active teaching. So it's also up to us to do something about it and to engage the students the best we can, right? And that's part of today's talk, is going through some of those techniques that we imply in our own classroom. So we brought for you some different strategies based on active learning, questioning techniques, and providing diverse perspectives. We think these are some of the examples that you can use, practically speaking, in your classroom. But because this is a little bit too general, we then decided to go into our own fields and actually offer you real case examples as well. So what do we mean by these three? So let's translate that to my field. So I invite Professor Kimura to start on her own strategies.
Thank you, Anna. So I'm going to break this down and go through the slide and give you some examples as well about all of this. And when I think about the way I teach, I think of myself as a leader in the classroom so that the students can follow the ideas that I'm talking about. For example, when we start with active learning strategies, the first thing I wrote was encourage group discussions about relevant criminal justice issues, ethics, and leadership. So I don't believe in just lecturing. And for some of you, maybe that works. It doesn't work for me. The reason I don't exclusively lecture is because I need that interaction from the students so that I can figure out what it is they need to learn, and also to find out what they don't know so I can change what I'm teaching so that I'm there for them so they get it. So in discussion, it's great because obviously you're getting different opinions. So I'm going to encourage that. And I'm going to encourage them to take criminal justice issues at John Jay because we're a college of criminal justice, but always, always relate whatever I'm talking about to ethics and leadership. Why? Why do I do that? Because ethics, as we know, is a code. It's how do I think about life in a positive, hopefully, manner, right? And so there's a lot of change going on in our world, and we know that. And from my perspective, some sets of ethics are not working to build community on the planet. So I'm going to point that out. But I also want them to decide on their own what they think is right and wrong in life and make a decision about it. But I want to at least question them about that. That's really, really important. If the only thing the students do is learn the material, but they don't learn how to apply it in an ethical manner, then we're going to have a problem. Leadership is pivotal. We have in my opinion, way too much conformity going on in this country in terms of how people look at things. It's good to understand what is, but then it's important to ask important questions about what changes need to be made. Thus, I have B right there, incorporate social action research. Social action research is something that we're working on a lot more in the honors program than we used to use. And I think that's really important. I'm a real advocate of social action research because, as you and I know, as professors and staff, it's really important to understand that when we are involved in social action research, we are asking questions about how to solve problems. In other forms of research, as we know, we're going to determine what the problem is. What is the issue that we're looking at? But within social action research, we're saying, what are we going to do about the issue? I don't need to look at another study that tells me that there are 5 people standing on the corner and they're homeless. I already know that. But what I do need to know is, how are we going to help those homeless people? So that's the angle I take on that. And that builds leadership, and the discussions get real lively in class, no matter what format I'm using, whether it's Zoom or not, or in person, because the students are hungry to learn about issues and how they relate to criminal justice. We go to questioning techniques. I encourage respectful questions. That's really important, because we have to, I think, in the classroom, build that base. We have to have respect for ourselves, respect for the students, and for us as a group, so that when somebody says something, we're never, ever personalizing it. We're never, ever hurting another human being intentionally. That's so important in the classroom. But they need to be asking questions, not just sitting there and looking at us and saying, okay, great, I'm going to write that down for the test. Because if we don't question things, we can't find the answers to basic and important criminal justice issues, I think. B, under questioning techniques, I put emphasize evidence-based answers. I love it when a student tells his or her opinion about something, but it's really important to also back that up with evidence. And that evidence needs to be credible. And in this day and age with social media proliferating, sometimes the students can't figure out what's the truth or not, and what is credible. So I would suggest, always make sure that they are using evidence, and that it's credible evidence in the classroom to back up whatever it is they say. And then finally, if we look at providing diverse perspectives, it's so important to improve cultural competence. For example, I've got a booklet right here. It's really thick, but it's from SAMHSA. And if you work in criminal justice issues that relate to treatment programs and mental health issues like I do, right? It's important to look at the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration book, tip number 55. It's all about improving cultural competence. Awesome stuff. Why? Because we have so many cultures at John Jay. It's so important to have respect for them, which I'm sure everybody in this room does. But we want to make sure the students do too. And finally, emphasize equity and equality. We talk about that in our mission at John Jay. We need to emphasize it even more in this day and age, right? Give everybody a fair shot at where they can be, and provide those resources. Think about all these resources we provide through the Wellness Center and this and that and da-da-da, all over campus. Keep pushing the students to think in terms of equity and equality, so everybody feels welcome here. Everybody feels like they're part of the John Jay family. I'm all done, Anna. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kimora.
You're welcome.
Is this something you want to go over?
Yeah. I was going to actually very quickly, in the interest of time, just do this with all of you in the audience if you want to jump in a little bit. But I have a real case example here of how we can expand upon. And Anna, if you want to go back to the previous page, that'd be great. And just put it there. Thank you. Yeah. No worries. This is an example that I use in the classroom, and I also use it when I'm working in prison with people, and it works effectively in both ways. And it's the $100 bill example, so I'll tell it to you very quickly, and you might want to use it in your classroom. Pretend that we're outside John Jay College, and you're walking somewhere, and you see a $100 bill on the ground. You don't know where it came from, right? People are just walking by. And so from an ethical standpoint, I would ask you this question. When you see the $100 bill there, whose is it? Right? And we could have a discussion more about this when we get to the discussion time at the end. or you can contact me later if you want to talk about it. But this example brings up huge ethical issues about all kinds of things. And it's important to look at it, because if we say that something is there and we don't know who put it there, does that mean that I have the right to take it? Right? And what does that say about us if we take something just because it's there, just because we have the opportunity? We'll come back to that example later if you want, or we can talk about it at some other time. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. And we'll move on to Professor Greg. He will share some of his ideas as well.
Okay, Anna, make sure you jump in and stop me at the allotted time, because sometimes
Okay.
I actually
No
tell my
worries.
students that I have students in my class that are in charge of keeping me quiet. They're actually, I tell them, you tell Professor Donaldson when to stop. I'd like to just piggyback a little bit on what Kamara just said about ethics and give you a real life example. I was coming up out of the 59th Street subway just before the pandemic. And there's a homeless guy that would sleep and keep all his belongings on a bench right there. And I saw him surrounded by a bunch of police officers who were standing splay-legged, looking at him like he was some kind of vermin. But there was one police officer who was squatted next to him on the ground. Obviously, they were going to move him and all his belongings out of that space. And that police officer was squatted very gracefully down, leaning toward the man's ear, talking to him. And I caught the police officer's eye, and he was one of my students. And he gave me a thumbs up. He was showing empathy and connection to that student. And it was one of the proudest moments that I've had as a teacher and as a person, that was my student. Because critical thinking skills doesn't only include figuring out what the best answer is, but it's also figuring out what messages to exclude, what messages are not empathetic, what messages are not based on the philosophy of connection of all people. When you get in a police department, quite often you'll start to get those messages that these people are no good. They have all kinds of words, skells, mopes. They have all kinds of words for people on the street. And if you can exclude those words and you can remain a human being, you will be the kind of police officer we're trying to produce here in this institution. To go back pedal a little bit, you notice Professor Kamara, as she was speaking, she was emphasizing certain words, certain contrast words, certain words she was billboarding. That is an extremely important thing to do when you're teaching, that you're making sure that your language is not monotone, that your language is not bland and colorless, that you emphasize and you pop those certain words. This is your art. This is an art, this teaching. And I liken it a little bit to painting a wall. Well, you could paint the wall, but it's not a premium paint job, because if it's a premium paint job, you have to prepare the wall, sand it, you have to put primer on it, and then you put the paint. Too many teachers just put paint on that wall. What they teach gets forgotten quickly. That paint peels off. You have to prepare your students. You have to prepare them to understand what they're facing, to understand what the goals are and how the process is going to work. And I spend a lot of time with the students talking about the process, about how this is actually going to work. One of the first principles that you have to know is you have to know your students. I teach a bunch of courses. I teach public speaking. I teach criminal justice and theater, criminal justice in the media, and I teach police leadership in the NYPD Master's Program. And I'll give you an example of how I introduce the students in the NYPD Master's Program, because they're different than our undergraduates. They have different expectations, a different gestalt. They're different. So I tell them the first day of class, I say, I know what you're thinking. You got in your car today driving the Long Island Expressway from Levittown to get here, and you're thinking that you have a hard, difficult job. You supervise hundreds, if not thousands of people in the NYPD as your position as a deputy inspector, or a chief. And now you have to come in to get your master's degree to try to increase your ability to rise in your job. You have to spend this Saturday, not with your family, but here in this classroom. And you're thinking how you can get through the next hour and a half with the least amount of energy possible, with the least amount of effort possible. You're going to be polite, you're professionals, but you're not going to put your heart into it. But that's not what I'm thinking. What I'm thinking is, in the next hour and a half, I can impart to you communication skills that are going to make your professional life significantly more effective, your academic life more effective, even your personal life. I guarantee it. And then I ask them, You notice anything different about me? And they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I say, what is it? They say, well, you act like you mean what you say. I said, that's the first rule of public speaking. The second rule is your message has to be clear, pistol shot clear. And the third message, which most people don't talk about, is you have to love your audience. And they will feel that as they move through. So I would like to emphasize today that I have them in the palm of my hand on that first day. And then what you need is you need a win. You need something that will show them that you can deliver what you said you could deliver. Right? I have in my criminal justice and media class, I have them read an article in the New York Times about how these detectives solved this crime. This guy, supposedly he was robbed and they killed his girlfriend and they wounded him. Meanwhile, he hired his friend to kill his pregnant girlfriend. They cracked the case and all's good. And I asked my students to read it. What do they think? And they're like, well, police did a great job. And I said, well, look and see who the sources for this story are. Only the police. So it's a story about the police in which the police gave information that made them look good. There was no defense attorney talking. There was no outside expert talking. They've been bamboozled by a police promo piece. And when they start to see that right away, they're like, wow, maybe I want to learn something in this class. Maybe I want to read between the lines in this class. Maybe this class is going to work, right? And so you have to have a win. Your message to the students in the beginning is very important. In that first class, where you tell them what this class is about, how this class will benefit them, the obstacles they're going to meet in this class, the way they're going to overcome those obstacles, and how a class is going to develop them, not only information-wise, but skill-wise, and in terms of their person, their confidence, etc. I want them to come out of this class a student that understands the learning process, is confident in the learning process, and can grow and flourish in the world. That's what we want to do. So those are interesting principles. Another quick principle, keep watching me, Anna, because
no worries.
we ran out of time. Another one is the persona of the teacher is not static. In other words, a lot of people say, well, I want to be authentic. I'm going to be myself. Well, yes, but if yourself works, right? But if you have to be a little bit more flamboyant or a little bit less flamboyant or a little bit more direct or a little bit more whatever it takes, I will be whatever it takes in the classroom to make that particular group work. And different groups have different buttons that you can push. I taught Shakespeare, Macbeth, for a couple of years, and I was just like every other teacher. The students didn't understand the language, blah, blah, blah. Until I hit on an interesting concept. I had a student, he called himself MikeyTV.com for some reason. That's what he wanted to call him. I said, Mikey, you didn't do the paper. You're being penalized. He said, why do you dress me in borrowed robes? I handed the paper in by email. I said, did you just quote Act 1, Scene 3? He said, yeah. I said, MikeyTV.com is now going to receive 10 points on the first test that he failed. Any student in this class that comes in with a quote that fits the conversation from Macbeth, 10 points. After that, they were walking around with the book, yelling out quotes to me all the time. And now I've incorporated that into my method of teaching. Just last semester, I had one student, I said, okay, we're going to give the 10 points. I want you to bring in a quote or that you saw something in your daily life that matches a quote. The student raised her hand. Laura Dana DiCristina, what a beautiful name. And she said, can I give it to you now? I said, yeah. She said, I was coming with my family over the George Washington Bridge, and I looked up in the sky, and I remembered, I noticed the quote from Macbeth, the west yet glimmers with some streaks of day. I said, oh, damn, that is something else. The west yet glimmers with some streaks of day. Because what these quotes do, what understanding the language does, it enhances their experience of life. It's not just understanding the logic of the metaphor and the language. It's expanding their experience of what they go through in life. And I let them know that over and over again. And I get quotes all the time on my email. Professor Donaldson, and they'll shoot me a quote. I just saw somebody was talking about, I talk about George Orwell. I just saw something very Orwellian. The final thing I want to leave you with is creating a sense of community. I bring in students that have been in my classes for years, and I bring them to my classes to talk to my students. I have a student in Georgetown Law School. She comes and talks to prospective lawyers in my classes and tells them what it's going to take. I have a journalist who comes in and tells them, what is this going to take? We can mentor them and tell them what this is going to be. It increases their feeling of contribution and responsibility, and it increases the students' feeling of community. That building of community is very important, and I'll leave the floor gracefully.
Thank you, Greg. I have one last thing from you. I don't know if you want to add the debate in your classroom.
Real life examples. Well, it's funny because Professor Kimura I've taught the prison system too. And so an example of how to connect to your audience, I walk into the first class in the day room. They're watching television, they're watching soap operas, and you have to tell all the people watching the soap operas to get out of the day room because now the class is going to be held there and everybody's grumbling. So you've started off on a negative note. And I told them, I'm facing the class and I said, we're going to be, who's the smartest person in this facility? And somebody raised his hand. He says, Ronnie Rodriguez, D block cell 4 or whatever. I said, I know Mr. Rodriguez, he's very intelligent. What if I told you that I could introduce you to the most intelligent, articulate, philosophically complete person, not only in this facility, but in this country, in this world, and not only this time, but for the last 500 years? William Shakespeare. Hang in there. They're like, damn. I said, that's right. Damn. You have to connect to your audience in a real life way. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you so much, Greg. Thank you. And as for my field in the STEM, I have somewhat more direct active learning strategies because obviously it's a more kind of objective field. And sometimes I do think professors struggle with this. It's about numbers, is very mathematical, it's very black and white type of thing. And even so, we do have a lot of gray areas and nothing is certain. Even when you have numbers, you have to explain to them that everything is based on individual differences and so on. So some of the strategies I provide them with real case scenarios that actually have happened, cases of overdoses or poisoning, so that they can apply what we learn in the classroom to actual cases. Sometimes they are mediatic and they are from famous people because it helps with their motivation. Believe it or not, sometimes it's just random cases that I've worked with before. So I do challenge them to critically analyze them based on what they have learned so far. And we go over those rather than just being on a classroom and reading over slides or talking about theories that they will not really be able to apply. So I think that's very important. Another thing is to keep them updated on the latest techniques. That's something that changes a lot in the STEM field. So sometimes you've been talking about techniques which are now obsolete and they go into the job market and they actually don't know how the new techniques work or how they are based off on. So it's very important to keep updated on the latest machines. Doesn't really mean we need to have them in-house. Some of them, obviously, as you can imagine, are really expensive. But we do have a lot, I must say, in the STEM department, and I'm proud to say we can provide them with the techniques which are being used out there. And of course, we do go over, again, circling back to Professor Kimura and Professor Greg, we do go over ethical dilemmas because that's a big topic in toxicology and research fields as well. So there is a lot that goes on into ethics, and I think it's important that our students learn that as well, especially when we go over, for instance, post-mortem matters. It's very important for them to understand there is a lot of ethics that must be respected. And there's a lot of ethics in objective fields as well, because we need to abide to guidelines. We need to make sure our methods are validated. So it's important to install that sense of being ethic all the way throughout, not just in college and once they leave as well. We encourage debate. That's something I always do in the classroom. So they are provided with qualitative and quantitative data, and they are always allowed to ask. To me, there is not such a thing as really a stupid question when I'm talking about science, because anything is possible. So maybe you have a question that you think you shouldn't ask, and I always encourage them that with me they can ask me anything, and we'll debate it, and we will discuss whether that is something possible or not, according to the topic we are being taught at that moment, right? So there's a lot of active discussion going on in my classroom, even though it is a science-based subject. So I teach mainly analytical toxicology, so it's very much mathematical, chemical, physical type of science, but we do discuss a lot. And I think that's very important, that you just don't take a number for granted and you immediately rule out an overdose case. And it's important to discuss those things as well. And sometimes also we go over more philosophical topics, right? How do they feel about any sort of bias that there might be in the forensic sciences, because that does exist. And I think it's better to approach the topic, even though it might be sensitive sometimes, approach it with care, but rather than just hide it under the rug. And also provide diverse perspectives. So I always try to promote an inclusive language, different media, success examples from all various backgrounds. So it's a little bit better if I show you real case examples. So recently, we've been part of this project called Voices, and Dan here is also a part of it. And it is led by Dr. Lisette Delgado Cruzata. It's a NSF-funded project. And within that, we are trying to make STEM students feel seen and valued in a field which is still very much one side. So we are always trying to feel and tell them that they are meant to be part of STEM, and that STEM can be a field where they can thrive, right? So within that project, I came up with this idea called STEM to the Square. So in that sense, then these words, they actually mean superpower that embraces me. So this is an activity that I bring to the students where I encourage them to think of a skill which they now have, which they might have perceived that as something meaningful in the past. And I try to turn it around and make that a skill at this current moment, and make them seem like what they have can now be something positive. I'll give you an example. For instance, having an accent, right? Many times we think we're not taken as seriously because we have an accent, because English is not our native language. And we do encounter those type of situations myself, and I see also the students, obviously. And I tell them, well, actually, let's think about it, right? The fact that you have an accent, it means you know another language. And that is incredibly valuable, especially nowadays. So yeah, I try to make them think of that particularity and turn it around, make it from something which could have been meaningful in the past, or they might have felt that way, and turn it into a superpower. At the same time, I also promote what I call John Jay Careers Day. So I try to bring individuals who have thrived in the sciences field, of course, especially in toxicology, but I also bring from other sciences as well. And basically what the students, they get to hear from them, their success stories, but very much down to the earth, right? So I ask all these speakers from all over the world to tell my students what they've been through, the good and the bad. So don't just tell them, oh, look at me, how successful I am and how I've been throughout my career, right? Tell them about the things that went wrong. Tell them about the time you doubted about yourself. Tell them about the time you struggled with mental health and you had to stop what you were doing. Maybe you had to take a break from your job. Maybe you were burned out. Tell them about that as well. So make it as realistic as possible. And I think that's something that really brings the students closer to what's happening out there, at the same time as showing them that just like them, these people, you as a student, you can also make it. And you can also make it in the STEM field. So those are some of the techniques that I employ. And we wanted to bring you something, which is, we brought this slide, Did You Forget About Me? Because we found out that some professors, they do forget what it meant to be a student. And when you do that, we can find some tension in the classroom. And it's very interesting because we have a story from Greg, if you want to share it at this point.
Yeah, during the pandemic, I knew I was going to have to teach remotely, and I'm technologically challenged. So I got a tutor to teach me how to do the Zoom and how to work on manipulate the systems properly without making a fool of myself. And as I was learning those things, first of all, I felt very slow. I felt as if I was going to be revealed, to be exposed, be not that smart. I felt like I was too old to be doing this. I felt all these insecurities, and I was thinking, you know what, this is what our students feel. When they walk into a public speaking class or media class, they feel these ways. But the person who was tutoring me kept saying, emphasizing, this will work. You are good at this. She was telling me I was good at little things. She was emphasizing the things that I did well. And then she was gaining momentum. See, you couldn't do that yesterday, but you could do it today. And so I could see the way she was reinforcing my confidence and building it up. And she was non-judgmental, which is important, because when I'm supposed to type in something and I'm doing it real slow, you could see some people kind of, what, can this old geezer get his act together? This is ridiculous. But no, there was not a hint of that. And I said, that's the way you have to be with your students. They're going to feel that way in your public speaking classes, et cetera, et cetera. Just to piggyback quickly on top of something Anna was saying about identifying the skills of your students is so important, that when I see a student who really is insightful verbally, I identify that. I say, we cannot continue this conversation without Miss Rodriguez, because she has a voice that's very clear. I let them know what they're good at, right? And even if a student asks a question or brings up a point, I actually identify that point as the Robinson point, and I put it on the test. What did Linda Robinson say about anecdotal evidence? I put their point, I incorporate them into the expertise side of the class, which raises their confidence level, raises their energy level, and then everybody thinks they're players.
Thank you, Greg. And actually that goes perfectly with our next slide, because we wanted to bring you some words that we believe contribute to a healthy classroom. And it goes together with what Professor Kimura and Professor Greg were saying before, being compassionate. So that's very important, to be compassionate with who's on the other side, right? Having a sense of leadership, but also towards the students, so that the student feels like a leader in his own skill, in what he's good at. Having a balance, being approachable. I think, Kimura, you have something to add here about leadership, I believe.
Well, it goes back to that whole piece about saying that we all have the potential to be leaders, and that one of the main missions of John Jay is to produce leaders. And so if we look at this wonderful slide that Anna put together for us, I think if we think of our students as utilizing all of these words all the time, they have so much potential to become the great leaders that we need on this planet.
Can I just say something, Anna, about it?
Yeah, for sure.
Compassion is so important, but you cannot water down your standards because of your compassion. So many of the students like, oh, the students are going from job to job. They're going from A to B. They've got family issues. Yes, all true. You understand that, but you also know that the rigors of your course are absolutely fundamental to their development. And so you have to make sure that you hit that sweet spot between understanding where they are and understanding how strongly they can be pushed, right? Too many of the students in this school have never read a book. I get seniors who have not read a book at John Jay, and that's a disgrace, right? The fact that they have not been forced to sit down and read a book. I tell them, you don't read the book in this class, you will not get an honor grade in this class. I promise you, right? So I don't care what it takes. If you're having trouble reading the book, call me and I help you read it, right? But you must read the book. So you cannot be so compassionate that you don't give them what they came for.
Mm-hmm. Anna,
No,
may
we
I
have to,
add?
it has to hit that. Yep, please, Kimura.
Sorry, did not mean to interrupt you. Professor Donaldson is right on the mark. I actually consider myself to be very compassionate when I give a student an F if the student did not do the work. because that was the rule that I had, that these were the requirements for the exam or the essay or whatever it is. And if they can't fulfill that, I am being compassionate by pointing out to them that they need to be disciplined in their life. They need to do it. If I made exceptions for everybody all the time about when they could turn something in because of this, that, and the other, how would they ever learn to have respect for themselves and use all those other terms? It just wouldn't happen.
Exactly. And that actually fits perfectly with a quote which the three of us really like, and I'll read it out for you. One of the criticisms I've faced over the years is that I'm not aggressive enough or assertive enough, or maybe somehow because I'm empathetic, I'm weak. I totally rebel against that. I refuse to believe that you cannot be both compassionate and strong. So this was said by the ex-Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, and it's something that we three agree with, that you do not need to, you can still be compassionate and strong and emphasize the importance, obviously, of learning and keep your standards while still having that compassionate and relatedness inside of you, right, with your students. And with that, we also came up with something, and this was during our Distinguished Teaching Symposium. Distinguished Teaching, yeah, I think I said it right, sorry about that. And that is the merge of subjects. So how can that help us? And we do believe this is something that can improve our lives and the lives of our students, is what can we learn from each other, right? And there is a lot of overlap, which you may not even consider before. So for example, we as sciences, we tend to stand quite away from other types of subjects, and vice versa, because we think we may not have anything together. And if we merge those subjects, we actually have a lot to learn from each other, and we can apply that to the classroom. So bridging the subjects can be very useful. What we have following is a couple of slides, which we will not have time to go through them, but they will be available to you, so you can actually check the ways that we can bridge different subjects. So we brought for you, yeah.
Can I just jump in for a second?
For sure, Greg, yeah.
So that term of bridging subjects, I have a New York Times reading session that meets on Wednesday from 1:40 to 3 o'clock, in which I have volunteer students during club hour who come and read the New York Times. And then as they're reading articles, I like them to refer those articles to psychology classes they've taken, sociology classes they've taken, evidence classes they've taken. So reading the Times on a regular basis allows them to bridge those courses and to retain what they learned in them because they're using it in real life. So if you want to send any students that way, we'll either they can contact me. My email is going to be available at the end, and I can give them the link to the New York Times Reading Club. We call it the Times Talk.
Thank you so much, Greg. Yes, so that's exactly what we're trying to promote. And later on in the slides, you will be able to read some of these comparisons and how we can help each other. So we wanted to bring you some challenges we believe are present in 2024. Of course, smartphones, which are incredibly distracting, mental health issues, which we must address. The war that is going on, obviously, brings a lot of instability, the polarization of politics nowadays, and also online teaching. So these are just some aspects that we see may affect the classroom nowadays and how we can tackle them. So that will be part of our discussion, which is coming up very soon, because we wanted to make sure we leave a lot of time for discussing with you guys as well. So going together with bridging our subjects, one of the things we came up with during this Distinguished Teaching Symposium is that it would be very fruitful, especially for young professors, to get together with someone more experienced and to actually learn from them, right? And to get this exchange of ideas. So we would like to promote some sort of meetings, maybe get some release time for more experienced professors to be able to provide that for us, and just have that exchange of knowledge, exchange of ideas. We do believe this is something that can impact the professors and, of course, ultimately the students, which is what we are here for. So having all of that in mind that we've been going through in today's meeting, we open the floor for discussion, and we are happy to hear your opinions, questions, suggestions, etc. Yeah, we have a question from Andrew.
Yes, hi. My question is directed at Professor Donaldson. Your very direct, provocative approach works well in person. I've observed it. But could it be translated to a totally asynchronous course?
Wow, great question, Andrew. Yeah, by the way, I tell students who are interested in evidence to read your book, New York Murder Mystery, because of all the kind of strange information that floats around these issues of stop and frisk, et cetera. But the answer is, amazingly, that, uh-oh, did I lose you? Am I there?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I don't know, I lost the picture. I don't know what just happened. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so my picture lost. So Andrew, it's amazing that it can actually work just as well or better on Zoom, because you can look right into people's eyes, number one. Number two, their names are right there, so you know them from the first minute. You can address them by name for the first minute. I would insist that they keep their cameras on. If they don't have their cameras on, there has to be a reason for it, and they have to tell me about it later on. We want to create that energy in the classroom. You can put people on spotlight. If a student wants to ask a question, or a student confronts another student with a debate issue, I put them both on spotlight in the room so that we can have that debate with the two people. Role playing is very easy to do on Zoom. And actually, you're in their space. You're in their house many times. You're right up in their face. And so, yes, the answer is the dynamic approach can work well on Zoom.
How about a totally asynchronous course? No Zoom.
Yeah, I'll beg off on that one, because I've never taught an asynchronous course on Zoom. So that means you're kind of speaking to people individually or in small groups, right, Andrew?
You're not really connecting personally in real time.
That would drive me nuts. I would have retired 10 years ago if I had to do that.
Professor Carmen, if I could interject, I could give you some input if you like.
Sure.
Okay, and great to see you, by the way, and great to see everybody. So here's what I do to try to make it very dynamic. In an asynchronous class, I give them, for example, a 13-part video on issues that were going on in Northern Ireland years ago and how it got resolved to a certain extent. And that was the first thing in a sociology class that they had to look at. So they had over 13 hours of video they had to look at on their own. And then we got together and we talked about it through a discussion board. And then that I think helped. I often send out videos to them, even if it's music videos, because some of them really inspire them to want to do better in class. So there are all kinds of different ways to connect and be dynamic that way. And also with the readings as well, and then promote through discussion boards or other means. It can happen. It's just on a different level. So.
Sorry, I have to leave this slide up in case anyone has any questions later on or wants to contact us.
Yeah, certainly. And if anybody wants to talk about teaching or wants some advice or wants to bounce some questions off me, please contact me. I like nothing better than doing this.
And thanks everybody for being here today. We really appreciate you being here, and we look forward to you looking at the slides and seeing if you have any comments that you want to send us. We really thank you. And Anna, thank you so much for being our moderator.
Of course.
And thank you, Dan, as well.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thanks so much. A lot of fun.
Thank